Hi friends, today I am going to discuss about peripheral nerve injuries. Peripheral nerve injuries is a very long topic. I am going to discuss it in two classes. In the first class, today I am going to explain about what are the peripheral injuries, its mechanism, its causes, how to repair, and basic principles for treatment and everything. And the next class, I am going to discuss about individual nerves. What is the anatomy of spinal nerve? You all know anatomy of spinal nerve. Spinal nerve is formed by dorsal root, ventral root, and dorsal is sensory and ventral is motor. And in thoracic, you know, all sympathetic outflow is thoracolumbar main thoracolumbar, and parasympathetic nerve supply is cervicosacral. So in the thorax, in the thoracic and lumbar nerve roots, along with the dorsal primary and sensory root, some sympathetic fibers also join with the nerve through via sympathetic ganglion. Sympathetic chain is present in the thoracic and up to lumbar region. So in this diagram, you see this is the dorsal sensory root. This is the dorsal sensory ganglion. Here it's called DRG, dorsal root ganglion. This is the ventral root. This is the sympathetic ganglion chain, and the gray ramus communicans is taking fibers from the sympathetic ganglion and merging it with the spinal nerve. This is the spinal nerve. The spinal nerve is the posterior ramus is formed. This is mainly supply the cutaneous supply of the dorsal skin region, and the main nerve is anterior primary ramus. You say motor. Several rootlets leave the anterolateral sulcus of the spinal cord and unite to form each motor root. These fibers traversing these roots arise from anterior horn cells and innervate the skeletal muscles, dorsal or motor. And sensory. These sensory fibers arise from pain, thermal, tactile, and stretch receptors, mainly by spinothalamic tract and dorsal column and everything in the spinal region anatomy. And the cell bodies for these fibers are located within dorsal root ganglia with axons entering the posterolateral sulcus of the cord by the way of several rootlets. Sympathetic the sympathetic component of all 31 mixed spinal nerves, the leaf spinal cord along 14 nerve roots. I told spinal sympathetic output is mainly by thoracolumbar. It from first the fibers exit from cord within the first 12 thoracic and first 2 lumbar nerve roots, enter the respective mixed spinal nerve, then promptly emerge it as white rami. And the white rami pass anteriorly to the corresponding ganglion. So intermediate cell mass cell column is present in the spinal nerve, which is the main source of sympathetic output. It's from it through white rami communicants which enter the sympathetic ganglion. From sympathetic ganglion through gray rami communicants, which again enter into the spinal nerve and continues along the spinal nerve. This is the basic anatomy of a spinal nerve. You see, this is very epineurium, the entire the most outer layer of the nerve, and within the epineurium you see several bundles of nerves is present, several packs of nerve fibers is present, and these several bundles are surrounded by perineurium. You see, one of those bundles is surrounded by perineurium. And inside each perineurium, you see several small nerve fibers, and each nerve fiber is individually surrounded by endoneurium. This endoneurium is present, and inside each endoneurium, one nerve fiber is present. One nerve fiber contains axon, and a surrounding myelin sheath is present. Okay, this is the basic anatomy. I'm repeating in reverse motion. This is the axon, basic component of nerve, and each surrounded by a myelin sheath. And each nerve fiber containing both axon and myelin sheath surrounded by an endoneurium, and some hundreds and thousands of nerve fibers surrounded by endoneurium like that are surrounded by perineurium. Some 4 to 5 bundles of perineurium is surrounded by epineurium. These are the blood vessels present in the epineurium and within the intermediate mesoderm of the nerve fiber. Yeah, you also know the structure of a myelinated nerve fiber. This is the axon, and each axon is surrounded by single cells of the Schwann cells, which is called myelin sheath. And myelin sheath and between those myelin sheath, gap is present, which is called node. And the gap, the thing between two nodes is called internode. You see the transmission in the nerve fiber is saltated transmission. It jumps from one node to another. What is the pathophysiology of nerve injury? if any nerve injury is present and axon is interrupted, means all the functions distal to the point of severance are interrupted. At the end of the proximal nerve segment, the axons multiply and attempt to grow distally. A connective tissue growth envelops as a response to injury. A connective growth is envelops at the end of the nerve fiber, and obstruct the path of these fibrils. This connective tissue and fibril growth forms a mass lesion called neuroma as a part of the body trying to reparative process. And the distal nerve segment swells to doubles its original size and undergoes Wallerian degeneration. The entire process completes in about 1 month. Occasionally, the connective tissue growth at the end of each segment may successfully penetrate the mass and go distally and restoring partial functions. So, nerve is one of the few tissues in the body which has very mild, very little healing capacity. So, if nerve is injured, means the proximal segment forms attempt to grow distally, but meanwhile the body, the response of fibroblast, some tissue is formed. It is called neuroma. So nerve fibers, whatever are regenerating, it's very difficult to penetrate those fibromas. So nerve regeneration is very rare. You see, this is an example, completely regenerated nerve fiber, but a neuroma is present. It is of a digital nerve is present. This is an example. So any part of the neuron detached from its nucleus degenerates and is destroyed by phagocytosis. The process of degeneration distal to a point of injury is called secondary or Wallerian degeneration, and the reaction proximal to the point of detachment is called primary or traumatic or retrograde degeneration. So if any nerve is damaged, means that the changes occurring distal to the nerve fiber is called Wallerian degeneration. The changes occurring proximal to the injury in the cell body cytoplasm are called retrograde degeneration. These are things, schematic representation of what are the changes happening in Wallerian degeneration. During the first 3 days after injury, definite morphological changes become apparent in the axon, in the distal part. It mostly usually initial swelling occurs in the distal part. And the response to Faraday stimulation can be obtained for periods varying from 18 to 72 hours. After 2 to 3 days, the swollen distal fragment becomes fragmented, and its subsequent fluid loss and the fragments begin to shrink and assume a more oval or globular appearance. A concomitant fragmentation or shrinkage of myelin sheath parallels the axonal degenerative change. So nerve fiber means axon is present and myelin is present, and the axonal initial swells and later shrinks and assume a globular and ovular appearance, and the same changes are simultaneously parallelly occurring in the myelin sheath also. By 7th day, macrophages reach the area in the greater numbers, and clearing of axonal debris virtually is complete. And after 15 to 30 days, Schwann cell division by mitosis is evident. By 7th day, the cells increasing in number to fill the area previously filled by axon and myelin sheath. This is a schematic representation of the Wallerian degeneration. You see Wallerian degeneration occurring in the distal part, and you see globular, ovular changes are happening. And this is nerve regeneration is going on, also depicted. The axonal budding is started, and the nerve is completely regenerated. But it happened after several months after injury. If regeneration is completed, it progresses to this stage, or if regeneration is not present, it will end at this stage only. Nerve regeneration. If endoneurial tube with Schwann cell is intact, so endoneurium is intact and Schwann cell is intact, means only the inside the axon is damaged. So the axonal sprout, you see in the previous slide, this is axonal sprouting or budding. The axonal sprout pass along its course and re-innervate the end organ. And the muscle nearest to the site of injury recovers first, followed by others. For example, if a nerve is damaged at this location, the nerve regenerates starts like this. So wherever the injury occurs, the muscle nearest or first muscles to be supplied, originally supplied by the nerve, regenerates first. Later, the distal muscles. It is called motor march. And the rate of recovery of axon is 1 mm per day. This is very, very important. Listen carefully. And the classification of nerve injuries is classified by two persons, Seddon and Sunderland classification. Seddon divided nerve injuries into three groups: neuropraxia, axonotemesis, and neurotemesis. What is neuropraxia? Before going to this, we will once again revise the anatomy of the nerve. So, anatomy of the nerve contains axon surrounded by myelin sheath, and each myelin sheath is surrounded by an endoneural tube, and some of the endoneural tube containing nerve fibers, some hundreds of fibers surrounded by one perineurium, and some perineurial bundles are totally surrounded by epineurium. So, what happens in neuropraxia? What will be damaged? So, in neuropraxia, there is minor contusion or compression of peripheral nerve with preservation of axon cylinder with minor edema or breakdown of localized segment of myelin sheath. So, in neuropraxia, the only thing damaged was myelin sheath. So, myelin sheath is damaged means the progression of nerve impulse in the along the nerve fiber is damaged. So, it is also called conduction block. So, the transmission of impulses is physiologically interrupted for a time, but recovery is completed in a few days or a few weeks. For example, a person foot falling asleep, this is a very mild case of neuropraxia. And after his legs have been crossed, is an example of a functional loss without an abnormal change. So, in neuropraxia, what damage is? Just the myelin sheath was damaged so that the progression of nerve impulse in the nerve fiber is interrupted. The axonotemesis, the name itself axonotemesis. So, here the damage of axon is occurred. A significant injury with breakdown of axon and distal Wallerian degeneration. Here axon is damaged, but with preservation of Schwann cell and endoneural tube. So, inside the axon is damaged, but surrounding Schwann cell and endoneural tube are intact. So, spontaneous regeneration with good functional recovery can be expected because the endoneural tube and Schwann cell intact means the pathway is intact. So that it was very easy for the axon to regenerate and re-innervate the distal organs. The internal architecture is relatively preserved. This can guide the proximal axonal regeneration to re-innervate distal and target organs. And neurotemesis, the name is a neuro, means entire nerve is damaged. Temesis. It is more severe injury with complete anatomical severance of the nerve or extensive avulsing or crushing injury. The perineurium and epineurium are also disrupted to varying degrees. Okay, so here the myelin sheath is damaged, the axon fiber is damaged, endoneurium is damaged, and some severe cases the perineurium and epineurium also damaged. The segments of the latter two may bridge the gap if complete severance is not apparent. In this group, significant spontaneous recovery cannot be expected. Okay. So, here another classification proposed by Sunderland. Sunderland proposed five classifications. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So, in Sunderland 1, so is equivalent to neuropraxia. You see in the diagram, this is epineurium, this is perineurium, this is endoneurium, and this is the axon. Okay. So, in neuropraxia, what happens means some myelin sheath is damaged. So, conduction block is present. The endoneurium, the perineurium, the epineurium are intact. In axonotemesis type 2 is the axonal discontinuity is present. The surrounding myelin sheath and endoneurium is intact. Okay. In type 3 and 4 or 5 are components of neurotemesis and severity with increasing severity. In type 3, the axon, you see this axon is disrupted and endoneurium is disrupted. You see this endoneurium is disrupted. And type 4, the axon is damaged, the endoneurium is damaged, and the perineurium also damaged. In the type 5, the entire trunk is damaged. The axon, endoneurium, perineurium, epineurium means the nerve was completely cut into two pieces. Okay. What are the effects of peripheral nerve injuries? motor, when a peripheral nerve is severed at a given level, all the motor function of the nerve distal to that level is abolished. And all the muscles supplied by the branches of the nerve distal to that level are paralyzed and atonic. So motor function assessment after peripheral nerve injuries. M0 is no contraction is present, and M1 is return of perceptible contraction in the proximal muscles. You see, I already told motor march. Motor march means the proximal muscles, means which are the muscles supplied first by the nerve fiber were recovered. And M2, stage 2 means return of perceptible contraction in both proximal and distal muscles. So nerve recovery is somewhat progress, and the distal muscles also now reinnervated. And M3, return of function in both proximal and distal muscles of such a degree that all important muscles are sufficiently powerful to act against resistance. And M4, return of function as in stage 3, in addition to all synergetic and independent movements also possible. Independent muscle movements also possible, not as a group. Okay. And M5 means complete recovery of motor is present. And sensory. And sensory loss usually follows a definite anatomical pattern. And after severance of peripheral nerve, only a small area of complete sensory loss is present. This area is supplied exclusively by the severed nerve and called autonomous zone or isolated zone of nerve supply. And the somewhat larger area of tactile and thermal anesthesia is readily delineated and corresponds to more closely to the gross anatomical distribution of nerve. This larger area is known as intermediate zone. So what are these isolated and intermediate zones? So when coming to muscles, each nerve specifically supplies some group of muscles. So that nerve is damaged, all those muscles were damaged. Very few muscles like flexor digitorum profundus in the forearm have contained dual nerve supply. It's supplied by both median and ulnar nerve, like in hamstrings, like in adductor magnus. So very few muscles have dual nerve supply, and most of the muscles have single nerve supply. So that nerve damaged means that muscle is paralyzed. But sensory is not like that. The nerve supplies some part of the sensory area, and which is also supplied, most usually supplied by complete opposite of the motor, supplied by other nerve also. So very small area is isolated, means that only the very small area is supplied by single nerve. So most of the areas have dual nerve supply is present. So if you want to test that nerve a sensory defect is present or not, you have to test that isolated area. Means the area is exclusively supplied by that suspected injured nerve. So what are those areas? So ulnar nerve, if you take ulnar nerve actually supplies the medial 1.5 fingers of the both dorsal and volar aspects of the hand. But it's in third finger and fourth and this radial aspect of the fifth finger also overlaps with the median nerve supply. But the palmar aspect, the ulnar aspect of the little finger is exclusively supplied by the ulnar nerve. So that damage occurs means that sensory loss is present, means there is ulnar nerve injury is present. Median nerve, palmar aspect of the index finger is exclusively supplied by the median nerve. This is median nerve supplied 3.5 fingers of the hand, but this area is exclusively supplied by median nerve. And the other fingers, other two fingers were overlapped with the ulnar nerve supply. And there is first valve space sensation is checked for the radial nerve. Like that, you have to check for isolated sensory nerve supply zones to detect a nerve injury is present or not. An autonomic injury. An interruption of peripheral nerve is followed by the loss of sweating and a pilometer response by vasomotor paralysis in the autonomous zone. This area is of anhidrosis. So sweating is absent, means sweating is sympathetic cholinergic. The only area where acetylcholine is present in present in parasympathetic nerve supply. But acetylcholine is only area present in sympathetic, means sweating. Okay, this area of anhidrosis. So in where sympathetic supply is absent means there is no sweating is present. The area of anhidrosis usually corresponds to, but may be slightly larger than a sensory deficit. The area is easily outlined by starch iodine test. What is starch iodine test? You will generally after starch iodine, the starch will become blue. If sweating is not present, there is starch is present like that only. There is no bluish discoloration of starch is present in case of no sweating. Okay. And another objective test described O, Rhiannon and Lukens is a wrinkle test. When normal skin is immersed in water for a time, wrinkling occurs. But a denervated skin does not wrinkle under this circumstance. As reinnervation occurs, the wrinkling of the skin returns. What are the etiology of peripheral nerve injuries? Peripheral nerve injuries can be damaged by metabolic or collagen diseases, or malignancies, or infection, or endogenous or exogenous toxin like botulinum toxin, or thermal or chemical injuries, or ischemic injuries like compartment syndrome, Volkmann ischemic contracture like that, and mechanical trauma is the most common cause. And every patient having an injured limb or limb girdle should be evaluated for possible musculoskeletal, vascular, and peripheral nerve damage. What are the anatomical features relevant to traumatic nerve injuries? Relation to surface. If the nerve is more closely to the bone, nerves are deeply located. Sometimes with more close to the surface means it's more easily damaged. For example, you see ulnar nerve injury is very easily palpated here. So it is more close to the surface means it is more chances of injuries present. And relation to the bone, sometimes nerves are present very close to the bone, not within the muscle substance. So any fracture of the bone occurs means there is more possible chance of nerve injury. For example, there is a radial nerve just the radial nerve travels in the spinal group just behind the humerus bone. So in that case also in humerus fractures, radial nerve injury is more possibility. In relation to fibrous septa, the radial nerve traverses from posterior compartment to here anterior compartment in the piercing lateral intermuscular septum. So the traversing septum means that area is also more prone to injury. In relation to major vessels, if the nerve is more closely to the blood vessels means by operating more arteries or while ligating aneurysms, in those things also by mistake also you may also ligate the nerve also. Of course, in the confined space, some like that, for example, there is carpal tunnel syndrome. In carpal tunnel means carpal tunnel, closed space, and Bayon's canal, closed space. Like that also in foot also flexor retinaculum, closed space also. So nerves in the closed space also more prone to compression type of injuries in the closed space. And fixation points along the course. Sometimes nerve is firmly attached to the bone or surrounding structures. If you see, common peroneal nerve is very much strongly attached to the periosteum of the fibular neck region. So it won't be movable. So there is no gliding motion is present at that location. So any stretching occurs or any injury to that bone fracture at fibular neck is more common cause of the common peroneal palsy. It causes foot drop. Okay. So the radial nerve is one of the most commonly injured of humeral shaft fractures. 14% are said to be complicated by injury of this nerve. The ulnar nerve is injured in about 30% of the patients with combined skeletal and neural injury involved in the upper extremity. This injury is most commonly associated with fractures about the medial humeral epicondyle, but it often results from the formation of callus around the elbow. The median nerve is injured in only about 15% of the combined skeletal and neural injuries of upper extremity. It is injured most commonly in dislocation of elbow or secondarily in carpal tunnel after injury of wrist or distal forearm. Axillary nerve stitch injuries occurs in approximately 5% of shoulder dislocations. The common peroneal nerve injuries most commonly the fibular neck in fracture of the tibia or fibula or dislocation of the knee. And branches of lumbosacral plexus are injured in less than 3% of the pelvic fractures. It is reportedly injured in 10% to 13% of posterior dislocations of the hip. The tibial nerve may be injured in fractures of proximal tibia and injuries around the ankle. And what are the electrodiagnostic studies to be used? So the two most common electrodiagnostic studies used are nerve conduction studies. Nerve conduction studies. So it measures the conduction along the nerve fiber. And electromyography. So myography, myo means muscle. So electromyography measures the electronic potentials within the muscle fibers. So these two tests are most commonly used to detect the type of nerve injuries. And both are complementary and provide information regarding nerve conductivity, axon or myelin involvement, and muscle recruitment capability. What is nerve conduction velocity? Nerve conduction velocity means measure of conduction of impulse in a nerve. it can be of two types, motor and sensory nerve conduction studies. The type of study depends on the nerve study. Motor study and nerve sensory study and mixed study. If it is sensory, if it is a nerve tested or the suspected damage, it means the sensory nerve, we will do sensory nerve conduction study, or motor, we will do motor nerve conduction study. If it is mixed nerve, we will do both. In motor nerve conduction studies, what we will get is compound motor action potentials. So those are recorded from a muscle innervated by the nerve under investigation. The surface electrodes are used and the active electrodes is placed over the muscle belly and other electrode placed over the tendon and the insertion of the muscle, means belly tendon electrode placement. So these are the recording electrode placed by the, so in the diagram the examiner testing for median nerve. The median nerve supplies by abductor causes brevis. So here the electrical stimulus is given to median nerve and the one recording electrode is placed over the belly of abductor pollicis brevis muscle. It is recording, and one other control electrode is placed over at the insertion of that muscle at the at the base of the proximal phalanx. You see, this is the motor nerve conduction studies. In sensory nerve conduction studies are two types, an orthodromic and antidromic. What are orthodromic and antidromic? What orthodromic means, the sensory nerve fibers, how the impulse travels, it travels like that. The sensory information travels like that. So you are giving an impulse here and recording somewhere at the traversing nerve fiber. It is called orthodromic nerve fibers, nerve testing. So if you do reverse in the original natural nerve fiber impulse direction, so you are giving stimulus here and recording here, means this is called antidromic sensory nerve conduction studies. The A, B are both are examples of antidromic and orthodromic nerve conduction studies. What is an electromyography? Electronic potentials produced by muscle fibers can also be recorded using intramuscular needle electrodes. So pathological EMG findings are only seen in axonal nerve injuries only. So pathological EMG findings are seen only in axonal nerve fiber lesions. Axonal nerve fiber lesions means axonotempsis and neurotemsis. So electromyography is normal in case of demyelinating lesions, which means neuropraxia. In neuropraxia, EMG is normal, but in neuropraxia, nerve conduction is damaged. So there is impairment of nerve conduction studies. So how? Explain. You see. So if you suspected nerve injury lesion, the EMG is be normal, but you are getting an abnormal nerve conduction studies. It means it is a demyelinating lesion. So you are getting also abnormal electromyography findings. It means the injury is severe. So axonal damage also occurred. It can be neurotemsis or axonotempsis. Typically, electromyography is recorded when muscle at rest or during a weak contraction and during a strong contraction. When muscle at rest, it produces some activities, some electronic activity is called spontaneous activity. In a healthy muscle, there is a brief burst of EMG signal when the needle is moved within the muscle. It is called insertional activity. When the needle is inserted within the muscle for an electromyography, it produces an electric impulse called insertional activity. And following axonal injury, several forms of pathological spontaneous activity is present. And fibrillation potentials and positive sharp waves are seen in axonal nerve injuries, or which are 14 to 21 days following an axonal nerve injuries. You can find these two lesions, and they usually persist for 6 to 12 months. Although some spontaneous activity may persist for many years. And complex repetitive discharges and myoclonic discharges are two separate types. Complex repetitive discharges and myoclonic discharges are sometimes seen in very chronic lesions of nerve injury. And strength duration curve. Strength duration curve also you use it for detecting nerve injuries. You see in the on y-axis you see stimulus strength, and the left and the x-axis you have stimulus duration. So this is the normal strength duration curve. So if any nerve injury is present, more stimulus strength is required for getting a stimulus, which means it goes rightward, and the stimulus duration also decreased in case of nerve injury. So the strength duration curve is more going right, means nerve injury is present. If the strength duration curve is after going right, if coming back to left side, means the recovery is happening. In this way, we can use the strength duration curve. So all these all these nerve conduct studies, electromyography and shunt duration curves are useful whether a nerve injury is present or not, whether it's complete or it's an incomplete nerve injuries, or it can be type of nerve injuries, when it also useful for any nerve, any regeneration occurring, and it can be useful in detecting the level of nerve injuries. Okay. What is Tinel sign? Tinel sign is very important. Tinel sign is a sign of recovery. Tinel sign is a sign of recovery. The Tinel sign is elicited by gentle percussion by a finger or percussion hammer along the course of an injured nerve. A transient tingling sensation should be felt by the patient in the distribution of injured nerve rather than at the area of percussion. The sensation should persist for several seconds after the stimulation. It should be tested in a distal to proximal direction. The positive Tinel sign is present evidence that regenerating axonal sprouts that have not obtained complete myelinization are progressing along the internuclear tube. So regeneration is going on. So it is Tinel sign positive. So the regenerating axons are not yet myelinated. So it's more sensitive to stimulus, external stimulus. So while tapping them, it produces tingling sensation. In whatever the area the original is up to be supplied by that nerve. Okay, this is called Tinel sign. What is the management of nerve injuries? So management of nerve injuries, first of all, like that A, B, C, D, E, everything. Sometimes you isolated nerve injuries, you will treat as a nerve injury. Sometimes it is associated with other injuries. So general condition of the patient must be evaluated. It will very frequently nerve injuries also in traumatic cases associated with arterial or bone or joint injuries also. So first you have to repair arteries. You have to maintain the viability of that limb. Later you have to do bone and joint repair, and after that you have to do nerve repair. The treatment can be conservative or operative. In operative means you will do complete nerve repair, or in late cases tendon transfer also done to replace the function of the injured nerve. The conservative, after the initial pain is subsided, the wound has healed, the early active motion of all joints of the extremity should be started. If early motion is not possible, it's not able to recover completely or incomplete, whatever, or gentle passive injuries. So passive means to be done by some other person. Or gentle passive injuries that avoid disrupting nerve tendons may be instituted. And all the joints. So if the conservative patient is kept on some sling or some support. But meanwhile, all the joints of the extremity must be kept supple. It should not be kept in that brace continuously. And soft tissue contractures must be avoided. Exercises help keep the soft tissue of extremity in a better physiological state. Similarly, an extremity with peripheral nerve injury should not be immobilized indefinitely. And dynamic and static splinting to support the joints to prevent contracture should be used intermittently. Okay, this last line is important. What is the time of surgery? It has been time-honored policy to advise primary suture when not possible, but the controversy concerning whether primary or secondary nerve repair is better remains unsolved. What is primary repair? The primary repair is carried out in the first 6 to 8 hours of injury. If delayed primary report carried out in the first 7 to 18 days is appropriate when injury is caused by sharp object, the wound is clean and there is no other major complicating injuries. What is secondary repair? Secondary repair is in case of lesions presenting some time after injury, or there is no improvement occurs in 6 weeks, or there is failure of conservative treatment is present. In that case, the nerve repair is conducted called secondary repair. An open wound in which a peripheral nerve has been injured should be thoroughly cleansed and debrided of any foreign material and necrotic tissue using local, regional, or general anesthesia. If the wound is clean and sharply incised, if the condition of the patient is satisfactory, and if a repair can be carried out in a quiet and unhurried setting with an adequate personal equipment, immediate primary repair of nerve is preferred. So if the wound is clean, the cut ends are neat, so you will do immediate primary repair. If the wound is dirty, some contamination is present, so it will be washed thoroughly and debrided, and you will perform a delayed primary repair once the conditions are improved. Sometimes in the process of cleaning and debriding, you will do apply small suture to the nerve to the surrounding tissues there. So that in the further when we will do delayed primary repair, it is very difficult for us to find the nerve ends, so that it won't retract. Okay. What are the instruments and equipment? A nerve stimulator should be available for all peripheral nerve injuries to use intraoperatively. The suture materials preferable are 80 and 90 and 10 and monofilament nylon. So operative microscope is definitely required. And the most epidural repairs are best done with 80 and 90 nylon, because epidural is most outside. For peronural or epiperineural repair, and more smaller ones also required. It is 90 or 10 monofilament nylon is preferable. What are the techniques of nerve fiber? Can be neurolysis or partial neuropathy or complete neuropathy and nerve grafting and closing the gaps between the nerve ends. Neurolysis means you are freeing of nerve fibers. Means some injury of nerve is occurred, the fibroblastic response is present, and it forms a fibroblastic response around the nerve. It can be inside the nerve or outside the nerve also. So it obstructing means it's mechanical obstruction of impulses is happening there. So when you clear the nerve fibers, means individual nerve fibers inside the nerve to move easily, it is called internal neurolysis. If the nerve is free from the surrounding enveloping scar, it is called external neurolysis. In the internal neurolysis, the epineurium is incised longitudinally proximal to the lesion, beginning not more than 0.5 centimeters from the level of cross changes in the nerve as determined by palpation. So the epineurium is incised, and in the inside, the nerve fibers are freed from the scar tissue. Okay. In partial neuropathy, this is called some neuroma is formed here. Some neuroma is formed here. So partial severance, large nerve, in case of sciatic nerve or radial nerve or very large nerve. So some part of the nerve is damaged, but some is good. So the partial severance of the larger nerve, such as sciatic nerve and cords and trunks of brachial plexus, is common. In such an injury, is partial neuropathy is best. So half of the nerve is incised and again repairing like this. Okay. In complete neuropathy, when the nerve has been completely severed and when the conditions already outlined are appropriate, the neuropathy, then means nerve repair, or after sufficient resection of proximal and distal ends of the nerve is indicated. Sometimes a considerable gap or defect remains after excision of any glioma and neuroma, and the selecting method for overcoming the gap is difficult. In general, a direct neuropathy may be possible with fairly large gaps in the median and ulnar nerves near the wrist and elbow following the mobilization of proximal and distal segments. But gaps as short as 2 to 3 centimeters in the brachial plexus or radial nerve or sciatic nerve or peroneal nerve, as well as the median nerve or the mid-forearm nerve, may require nerve grafting. Okay. So, neurolysis, partial neuropathy, or complete neuropathy, and nerve grafting. See, this is an intraoperative diagram of this is a nerve, this is a nerve, one end of the nerve, this is another end of the nerve. These two are sutured here. This illustrates the repair of divided nerve at operation. It is important that correct rotation of the nerves to be ensured at operation. In case of fibrosis at the end of the divided nerve due to delayed repair, it is essential that ends of the nerve to be trimmed until the neurofibrils can be seen, then opposite end to end. Okay. So methods of closing gaps between the nerve ends. It can be mobilization, it can be transposition, it can be bone dissection, it can be nerve stretching and bulb suture, it can be nerve grafting, or it can be nerve crossing. What is mobilization? Mobilization means, so for example, the nerve is damaged here and the gap is present. Proximally, the nerve is mobilized of surrounding tissues and it can be pulled off easily. If without mobilizing, you can't, then the nerve is lightly attached to surrounding tissues, it won't come distally. So you mobilize the surrounding tissues and bring the nerve down and repair it. Okay, this is called mobilization. And meanwhile, if sometimes joint flexing means in a full stretched condition, the nerve ends may not occur. You flex the joint for example, elbow up to 40 degrees, knee joint up to 90 degrees, the nerve is relaxed, then nerve end to end repair is done, and slowly you perform the extension without damaging at the repairing side. And transposition. Transposition means the path of the nerve is same. For example, the ulnar nerve is present at the behind the elbow joint, behind the medial epicondyle. So you bring the ulnar nerve anteriorly to the elbow joint. Means the nerve is traverse like that. So nerve traverse like this. So the nerve is relaxed. So distally you can do end-to-end repair of the nerve. So it is called nerve transposition anteriorly. So anterior transposition of nerve. It can be subcutaneous, it can be submuscular, it can be of various types is present. And bone resection is present. Sometimes nerve ends, both nerve ends are present. It's very difficult to approach, attach them. If you attach very tightening is present, you will do bone resection is present. So the length of the bone is decreased, means the ends are relaxed, and you can do end-to-end repair of the nerve in this way. And nerve grafting is present. You will take nerve from some other part and you will use it as a graft. And nerve crossing is a very rare procedure. It will be useful in case of both ulnar and median nerve is present. It is so that the nerve stumps are sutured to each other, and later secondary operation is done. It is very rare. So what you have to remember: the mobilization, flexing of the joints, and transposition, and bone resection, and nerve grafting. The source of the nerve for interfascicular nerve grafting. The sural nerve. Sural nerve means it supplies the lateral part of the leg. Cutaneous supply, pure cutaneous nerve. The sural nerve is the most commonly used, and in most situations is recommended up to 40 centimeters of the graft material can be obtained from each leg. Okay. The lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve, which is lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve, it supplies the lateral forearm of the nerve, which is a continuation of muscular cutaneous nerve. So lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve is most commonly found just lateral to the biceps tendon, here elbow, and alongside the cephalic vein. And up to 20 centimeters of graft material can be obtained through longitudinal incision. Okay. The medial antebrachial cutaneous nerve, which is a direct branch of the brachial plexus, and also used for nerve grafting. And the dorsal digital sensory branch of ulnar nerve. Ulnar nerve also you will do dorsal digital sensory branch. So it also be used for digital nerve grafting. With a very small nerve, it will be useful for case of digital nerve grafting. Epineural neurography means the epineurin is sutured so that the nerve the nerve ends are come close together. So the rotational alignment is successfully done by observing the orientation of surface vessels. So this is, if you think this is the nerve fiber, there will be surface blood vessels present. So you have to orient the nerve fiber. So this is nerve fiber. It may rotate like this. So you rotate the nerve fiber. So by delineating by observing the orientation of the blood vessels, so that correct nerve is in correct opposition. Okay. And place the first suture in the posterior or deep surface of the nerve in the epineurium, and leave the suture long to make lateral rotation of the nerve. So nerve rotation will be useful if you leave the long threads of the suture material. And now place the next 3 sutures in the remaining 3 quadrants of the nerve. So this is called epineural neurography. So neurography means nerve repair. Epineural nerve repair. Okay. This is perineural nerve repair. Means the individual perineurium is if you take in one epineurium surrounding inside one epineurium, there are only 10 to 20 perineurial bundles present. So inside epineurium you are repairing by perineurium. It means more meticulous repair of the nerve. So this is perineural nerve. Previously told 8090 used for epineural repair are for much smaller, still smaller threads are used for perineural or endoneural fascicular repair. Okay. So this is the incision given for the sural nerve grafting. This is the sural nerve supplies the lateral foot. So this is one of the main graft for nerve injuries repair. So after treatment, after neurography or nerve grafting, the extremity is mobilized in a plaster cast or splint, and the posterior molded plaster splint usually is satisfactory for the arm unless the shoulder girdle must be immobilized. The wound should not be dressed until 7th to 10th day, and the sutures are then removed. In removing the splint or cast, extreme care is necessary to avoid tension in the line of the suture, because nerve is very difficult to repair, and nerve is the expectation of coming, the results also very meticulous. So if you do the things very meticulous also, then we will expect some results from nerve repair. So you have to do meticulously. And factor that influence the regeneration after neuropathy. Yes, neuropathy are more obviously in the more progressing the age means very the results will be bad. And the delay in the time of the injury and repair. More the time lapse between the injury and repair means the recovery is less. And the level of injury. The more proximal the level of injury means more severe the loss of sensory and motor function, and there is less recovery. So more proximal means less recovery will be present, and more severe will be the deformity. And the type of the nerve, and type of is a pure motor and pure sensory or mixed nerve. So in ascending form, it's a pure motor is the recovers best, and pure sensory is medium, and the mixed nerve. When compared to these two, the recovery is less. And condition of the nerve ends. The condition of nerve ends, the conditions are the nerve ends are clean and clean cut means the recovery will be best. If the conditions are the condition nerve ends means there are damage or crashed or any debris is present or contaminated like that, you have to trim it. So in that case also the recovery is less. And the Sunderland also suggested that meticulous handling of the nerve ends, asepsis care with nerve mobilization, preservation of the neural blood supply, and avoidance of tension, and the provision of suitable bed with minimal scar, and all exert favorable influence on nerve. These are the all factors also have effect on nerve regeneration. Okay. So in this class we discussed about the basics of nerve injuries, types of nerve injuries, and types of surgeries and conservative treatment, and basic principles of treatment, everything. In the next class we are going to discuss about individual nerves, means median, ulnar, and radial nerve, very importantly, and some delta and axillary nerve and musculocutaneous nerve and sciatic nerve. So we are going to discuss about individual nerve testing and individual muscle, individual nerve recovery and individual nerve anatomies. Okay, thank you.
సార్ అయిపోయింది. బస్